Hello and welcome to the annual WriteHive conference. This year is packed with a ton of great sessions for writers, writing professionals, and the publishing industry. WriteHive is a nonprofit serving the writing community with free and inclusive resources, events, programming, connections, and more. The 2024 conference brings you this fantastic panel, Writing Multiple Genres and Author Brand, with Jessica Lewis, Kelsey and Lovelady, Bobby Nash, and Lacy Phillips. Could you just kind of introduce yourself with your pen name, all of your pen names, and what genre, all of your genres that you write?
Of course. So my name is Kelsey Ann Lovelady, or I also write under the name Ruby Marley. Kelsey Ann Lovelady is the pen name that I use for most of my regular writing, which is murder mysteries. I've done women's fiction. I've done sci-fi, steampunk, and then Ruby Marley is primarily my erotic and romantic writings. And I'm also the vice president of marketing for Tea with Coffee Media, which is an indie publisher and media company started by indie authors for indie authors.
Yeah, I'm Jessica Lewis, and then I also write under the pen name Jazz Taylor. So the Jessica Lewis side, I write YA horror and also romance. So my romance is not out yet. So right now it's just horror, but it will be romance next year. And then Jazz Taylor is for middle grade, and I write contemporary there, and they are all themed around cats. So they're all cat puns. It's meow or never, starting from scratch, and cool cat. So
Hi, I'm Bobby Nash. I write all kinds of stuff. I play in a lot of multiple genres. No pen names, just under the one name so far. Although I've considered it. I just haven't pulled the trigger yet on doing a pen name. I write a lot of crime fiction, thrillers, things like that. But I also get to play with around with sci-fi, fantasy, horror. I write comics. I get to do media tie-in stuff from time to time. So I get to play around a lot. So that's me.
Hi, I'm Lacy Phillips. I do currently work in digital communications and social media content creation with PS Literary. So I'm there to support our agents and 250-ish authors in all genres, all of them, nonfiction, humor, kidlit, horror, like everything, which is a particular challenge. And I also do work with many nonprofits, helping them do brand management, anywhere from just giving them some digital assets to handling every aspect of their online presence. I'm the voice behind the tweets sometimes. So hello, be nice. So that can be a particular challenge when you're talking about multiple genres. Then you get to think about multiple industries and how do you like code switch between talking about HVAC repair to a nonprofit that deals with child trafficking. It's tough.
And for quick introduction for myself, I am Rae D'Arc, your moderator. I write books that I want to read. So that means I read or I write books in any genre as long as it has humor, some action suspense, and some romance. So I have literal genre mashups between horror, fantasy, and romance for authors. And then I also have fairy tale retellings for teens. So let's get into this then. What would you say is important to consider during the crafting stage when delving into different genres? Jessica, could you start this up?
sure. So personally, I'm like you. I write exactly what I want to read, and I have a lot of different interests. So I like romance, and I like horror, and I like little cat books, and I'm into sci-fi and fantasy. So those may be on the horizon. But for me, when I start a new genre, I make sure I read very extensively in the chosen genre, because every genre has different rules and conventions, and like romance, you have to have a happy ever after. So what I do in horror is very different than what I do in romance. Those genres has different expectations and what you can and can't do. So you do have to respect the genre that you're writing in. So before I start, I always read a lot and try to look up panels or like talks and like what famous romance authors are doing and what they're thinking and how they approach it, and then I start drafting. So that's my personal process.
Thank you. And Kelsey?
Yeah, as it was said by both our moderator and Jessica, I write what I want to write. So I think the important thing to consider when you're delving into different genres is, do you want to write in this genre? Some people can say like, well, you don't necessarily have to consider that, but it does help that you like the projects that you're working on, especially since you're going to be reading them a lot. It is also important to remember that with doing that, you're appealing to a bunch of different people with a bunch of different interests, and you have to try to get those people to listen to you if you're not from the genre that they are normally interested in. And that can be harder than a lot of people think.
Well, certainly understanding the genre you're writing is very important. Knowing there are things that we know once we've done this a while. We're all, as you read and you write a lot, there are things we know we can and can't do a lot of times going in. Certainly if you're working for a publisher, you're usually given that up front. Here's the do's and don'ts. And they're usually pretty standard. Certainly doing media tie-in stuff, there's a lot of that. There's a lot more don'ts than do's. So you kind of know what you can get away with and what you can't. So when you're doing that, you put those ideas forward first. But then if you want to do something that's a little outside of those, then you just kind of know, I should ask first, as opposed to do it. And then they go, you can't do that, so that kind of stuff. But a lot of the times, and I always go back to trust your characters. Your characters will tell you if they don't want to do something or they want to do something or any of that kind of stuff. So trusting the characters and just knowing the publisher you're working for is a good start for those.
I think that Jessica talking about her broad range of interest and being able to like stay excited about the work by finding different areas of interest that you can focus on was so important. But more than that, I think Bobby really nailed it, talking about learning the genre expectations that readers have before you kind of make the choice to do any kind of like blending of genres is like super important. So I think they nailed it already.
Yeah, it's part of, I think that's a great segue into kind of making an author brand, figuring out what you kind of represent and how you can represent it to your audience to get to the readers who will like your various genres. Kelsey, would you be able to like kind of define for someone who doesn't understand, who has maybe never heard of it, what is an author brand? Why is it important?
Of course. So in as simple of terms as possible, your author brand is your identity as a writer and what people think of when they think of you and think of your books. And it's the same thing as a normal brand. It's just you're specifically looking at focusing on who you are as a person, as a writer, and who your audience sees you as.
Okay, awesome. Jessica, did you want to add anything to that, or you good?
No, that's good. That would be my definition.
You did a good job, Kelsey.
I mean, the best way that I like to think about it is when you take another brand that really has a very specific image to it. So Ford is a great example. Every single person has an idea of the person who is driving the Ford truck. It is either
the truck, yeah.
Specifically a truck. It is specifically a truck. It is either the guy who grew up on a ranch, a farm somewhere down in the South, or just the wife of that person, most likely.
So To take it more on a personal level, starting with Jessica, how would you describe your author brand, and what elements would you say help define your author brand?
I would say that I'm very chaotic, and I think my readers know this. I really embody that phrase, like never let them know your next move, because I don't even know my next move half the time. But
You discovery writer or a pantser?
no, I'm actually not. I'm a plotter,
Oh.
a hardcore plotter, but the rest of my life is in horrible chaos. So I just have this one thing that I can be organized with.
All right, sorry to interrupt. Keep going.
No, that's fine. But I would say my brand for Jazz Taylor is different from Jessica Lewis. Um, in Jazz Taylor, you have to expect something very fluffy, very everything's going to be okay in the end. There's going to be cats, of course, because of the cat puns. And it's just very short and sweet, and very low stress. But my Jessica Lewis brand is very complicated. The care and even with the romance, it hasn't come out yet, so I haven't heard back from readers just yet. But my characters in the rom-com and my horror are still very complex. They have complicated feelings about their parents and how they reside in the world. There's also a bit of humor in the rom-com. Of course, there's more humor, but in the horror, there is a touch of humor as well. And I think that if you, even in the two different genres that are very different, polar opposites pretty much, you can always expect my characters to be girls who are just very full of grit and they don't give up. And so I think I'm not saying I did that on purpose, but I think that the more books you write and the more you put out, there tends to be like they reflect you as a person. Like your books reflect how you are. And so they can in genre writing can be very different, but there is a unification because I wrote them. So
That's true. Kelsey, so how would you describe your author brand, and what elements define?
Autism. No. No, the Kelsey and Lovelady side, even though the genres are kind of wide, because like it's everything from steampunk young adult to this murder mystery new adult that I do not recommend for anybody under the age of 18. But I think the best way to put it is complex, or at least a lot of moving parts to the story. And I do have autism. I was diagnosed 2021. And I think that with that just naturally comes like every single one of my main characters is most likely gonna have autism in some way, shape, or form. And all of my main characters,
yeah.
yes, is hence why it's called Spectrum.
Mm.
And all of my main characters are going to be strong women who get their happy ending, whatever that may mean to them. And it can range from just on the path to healing from a broken heart to married with, unlikely to have kids because I don't usually bring kids into my romances. But yeah, for the Kelsey and Lovelady side, strong female characters with who most likely have autism with complex stories. With the Ruby Marley side, it's a lot more laid back. It's a lot more just have fun, go to the fun parts of your brain, enjoy your feelings and your sensations as well as that within the book.
Awesome. And Bobby, how would you describe your author brand?
I'm a very I like to think of myself as like a fast paced kind of, there's a lot of action, there's a lot of moving where the story is flowing. And that's kind of I think you could probably slap the slash thriller on every genre I write. There's kind of that element to everything, whether it's horror or Western or whatever. I love playing with that, with action and moving and chasing and running, or some kind of something like that going on. I don't do as well with people just standing around talking. I mean, I can do it, but I mean, I prefer to, let's go, let's have something happen and do that. So that kind of style goes across multiple genres. Now, even though you kind of write certain genres a little differently, like I don't write my crime fiction exactly the same way I write my horror, for example. But there are still those types of things in it. I do some stuff that's aimed more at children. So same kind of thing, but the action is different. It's a different kind of action. And so, yeah, just playing with that. I love to have stories that move. I love playing with the idea of how you actually write. Everything can speed up or slow down how the person reads it. And so I do a lot of that on purpose just to, we need to, okay, we're going to have this big action thing here in a minute. Let's calm everybody down. So it's you kind of write it away so that when we turn the page onto this action, there's a different look to how the page is. It's a lot shorter, choppier sentences, and people are speeding up how they're reading it. So things like that I love playing with. And so, yeah, so there's always some kind of that thrillery action aspect to everything I do.
That's awesome.
I'm sure one day I'm going to do something where that doesn't work, but so far I haven't had too many opportunities there yet.
So, Lacy, you have a different perspective on author brand from the marketing side. How would you expand on the definition that Kelsey gave for author brand?
I just did a whole workshop on author brand and teaching a whole room full of, I think they said there was about 120 people, which was awesome. So I just did a whole workshop that was specifically about like cultivating your author brand. And so they were like, well, what's your definition? And I was like, oh, I have to come up with it. Okay. So so I just did this groundwork not too long ago and it's fresh in my head. And I told everyone like your author brand is a blend of your personality, what you write, and your reputation in the industry. And you can have different reputations for different genres that you write in, right? So you have to take all of that together, and that's your author brand. But I always caution people like, don't confuse yourself with the product. The product is the book, the work, right? And a lot of people will make the mistake of like, they'll make their social media handles the title of their book, the setting that the book takes place in. I've seen people do that. And I'm like, that's a bad approach. Let's come back from that. Just do your author name. Or if it's good enough for William Gibson, it's good enough for me. Pick a moniker. He's the Great Dismal on X, on Twitter. He has been for 25 years or however long. And if it's good enough for him, it's good enough for me. I personally don't use my name as my handle, but I also don't make my handle tied to one project, right? Because you're going to have other newer projects down the line. And so Orson Scott Card, hugely problematic author. I'm so sorry to have to bring him up, but we're going to use him as a cautionary tale. So I feel like that's fair game. He tied himself to Hat Rack River as his domain name way back in the day when chat rooms were still like where people hung out on the internet. And I think, to my knowledge, it remains so to this day. I stopped paying attention to him when he outed himself as being really problematic. But he tied himself to the setting of one of his series. Now he has multiple series now. And that became a legacy that was difficult for him to navigate around. So I always give people, that caution.
Yeah, I get to have fun with in this series, they are literally in the world of our fiction. Our fiction is their reality. And so the first book is, a horror exploring the land of romance, being totally culture shocked. And then book 2, they go to the land of fantasy and she has fun culture shocks with them. And then book 3, they go back to horror. So I specifically tried to write each book. Like this one has all the beats and the expectations of a romance, and then book 2 has all the beats and expectations of a fantasy, and then book 3 has all the beats and expectations of a horror, and all while still being kind of dark humor, but still lighthearted. So they are all trying to keep them all together, and that was probably the hardest part, to keep them all together. And so, like, what other challenges have you faced? Let's actually go reverse. So Bobby, you first. What challenges have you faced when marketing and crafting different genres?
Yeah, certainly where you market changes. Comic fans might not be interested in my horror novel, that kind of thing. Sci-fi fans, I found, tend to read everything, so I always promote to sci-fi fans. But yeah, so knowing where to promote it, what to focus on. In a drama, you're gonna spotlight different things than you're gonna spotlight when you're doing a horror promotion. Because drama is more about the characters. Horror is probably more about the horrific thing happening. That kind of thing. When you watch a slasher movie, everybody talks about the killer. The victims tend to be like throwaway characters. But if you're doing a drama, you would focus very much on the characters, and so you would use that in your promotion and marketing aspects. Meet this character, fall in love with this character, and if you fall in love with the characters, you're gonna love the story because you love the characters. So it's different, and then where you promote is sometimes different. You can't send everything to the same news outlets or book news outlets. Know who know what they like to talk about where you're sending it. Yeah, I'm not going to send my sci-fi novel to a romance blogger, for example. So there's that kind of stuff of just knowing where, doing the research of who looks at what, who likes what, who will talk about things. If you want to be interviewed, because there's a lot to marketing. We get out on podcasts and we do press releases and interviews, and so figuring out who is the right uh, group to put our efforts into helps.
Yeah, finding where your audience is.
Yeah, it takes a lot of research.
When your genre, yes. So,
yeah.
Kelsey, what about you? What challenges have you faced when crafting and marketing different genres?
The biggest challenge that I've found, especially with having 2 different pen names, is you do have to do double the marketing, because you have to have double the social media pages. Even if you only have like the bare minimum, which is probably either a Twitter profile or an Instagram profile, you still have to have one for each of them. You have to post consistently with them. You have to grow the audiences organically, and they are not always going to inform one another. So you can't always say, hey, follow me on this other account for these books. And the audience may go, thanks, not really my thing. And when marketing is tough enough as it is, and then you have to do it twice, boy, it gets fun.
And that's it. If they know, even if they know you're both the same person, yeah, you still have to do it separately.
Lacy?
So one of the challenges of being like a brand manager and you're trying to do promotion for like a wide range of titles or products, and in particular in the publishing space, like the audience that you're talking to for kidlit and picture books or middle grade, because a lot of kids who read middle grade have their own phones and they're on social now, is going to be wildly different than if you have a nonfiction project talking about like politics, like geopolitical things. And we have authors who do both, right? And so do you try to code switch when you're marketing to these specific, in marketing, we would call them segmented audiences? Do you break up your newsletter into segmented audiences and send specific news to one subset of people and a different set of copy and images to another set of people? do you try to keep your everything under one umbrella? Then what does that visual identity have to say? If you're a horror writer who also writes like YA rom-coms, which happens, I know one off the top of my head, and you want to keep everything under one name and everything under the same umbrella, what does your website end up looking like? You know, what kind of visual identity do you have that can like blend across all of those genres? That's a really big challenge. And I think that's part of what contributes to people saying, let's just fully separate everything. And I will do one website under one pen name and another one under a different thing. I'll have multiple handles for everything because that feels simpler. But then you have to keep up with both of those things, which compounds all the work. So what kind of time commitment does that end up being? I mean, you have to balance all of that. I can't tell you what to do. You just have to be aware that those are the challenges. So
anything to add, Jessica?
I mean, everybody pretty much said what I wanted to say. Yeah, but I will say I did struggle with website unity. Like
Yeah.
I'm terrible with websites, so I hired someone to help me, and she had all of these really confusing questions, like what color do you think your books are? And I'm like, I don't know. They're so different. So we settled on more of a neutral kind of scheme. I think it's like a teal and a gold and a gray, so that can be like not ultra pink and cute for like the rom-com, and then not like dark and mysterious for the horror. But it was very difficult, and I think sometimes blending like on a just for like a graphics and like websites and social media presence, I think it's pretty hard to do.
Awesome, thank you. So let's see, Bobby, are you the only one not with an extra pen name?
Yeah, I don't have a pen name.
Okay.
I've struggled with that. I am actually in the process of working on something that when I shop it around, I have a pen name. I'm going to use a pen name because it's different enough from everything else that I do that I'm going to try it.
Is that the deciding factor of like just how different it is?
I think
let's dive into this a little bit. Yeah. When do you choose, or why do you choose when to use a pen name?
Yeah, I think that for me it is. I mean, because I thought about it early on in my career because I was like, okay, I'm doing this type of stuff, but now I also want to do this genre. Mm-hmm. And I considered it for a minute, but then I was just like, I just rather everybody, because even when if I use a pen name, it's going to be like the worst kept secret in the world because I can't not talk about what I do, Mm-hmm. And I do a lot of conventions and events, and I would hate to like not take books with so
yeah.
So the idea here is doing it differently, because it would aim at a different audience than any of the audience that I've reached before. So the thought was, if I'm going to reach out to a publisher to see if a publisher is interested, then doing it under a pen name might be good, because then there's no preconceived notion of, oh, this guy writes this stuff, so yeah, because that does happen. We've probably all heard it. Oh, you write sci-fi, you can't write anything else. Oh, you write mystery, you can't write anything else. And that's I totally disagree with that. As a reader, I read multiple genres.
Mm-hmm.
As a writer, I feel I can write multiple genres. So for me though, the idea of it being different enough is going to give me a chance to try it.
Yeah. So Jessica, you do have publisher and you have multiple pen names as well. So do you have different, or explain how that works to us?
So for me, it was more about timing. So the way it ended up happening is that my kid book, Meow or Never, was the first book to be published. It was not the first book that I sold though. So my first YA horror fantasy genre mashup, that one, Bad Witch Burning, I actually sold first. And so I wanted to use Jessica Lewis for that. But then because of publishing nonsense, the book that I sold second actually came out first. So I decided somewhere along the way when I realized that I decided to use a pen name for the kids book because I didn't want a 9-year-old to read my Meow or Never a Cat Pun and be like, oh my gosh, I loved it so much. Let me see what else she has. And then go immediately into horror where the dog dies in chapter 3. So I did not want that to happen.
It's probably a smart move.
Yeah. So I luckily that worked out for me, and it ended up separating the two personas. So that actually helped me along the way because I was able to firmly establish my Jazz Taylor cat brand. And so the kids, when they read it, they're like, oh, this author writes about cats. And I really love cats, so I can read everything that she's written. And then I don't have to worry about them jumping too far ahead. And then in contrast, my Jessica Lewis brand, I don't have to worry about, oh, well, I should soften this or I should not kill the dog, because it's just two separate entities. And I find that it's worked out well for me.
Oh, God. Okay. Well, and Kelsey, did you have anything to add about your experience choosing to use multiple pen names?
So yeah, the reason why mine came about were twofold, and one of them was very similar to Jessica's. The first book I ever published as Kelsey Ann Lovelady was a young adult steampunk novel. So when I made the decision to go into erotic romance, I said to myself, I have a duty of care to make sure that the audience of this one does not find this one and that there's no confusion. And number two, my Ruby Marley's side explains a lot about me, and I didn't want my family to learn certain things, so it was like, don't even give them a name that they can find. Like
That's fair.
They will never know.
Yeah, and I think having the different age group, because see, that's me. I don't most of my stuff, even multiple genre, it's the same age group more or less.
Yeah.
Teenagers and up. So I'm not as so it hasn't been a concern now. Like if I was writing stuff for little kids, then yeah, that would probably be different. But yeah, because my stuff has mostly been aimed at that kind of similar audience, it hasn't been an issue. But yeah.
Yeah. When and why would you suggest a client uses a pen name then?
Ooh. So one of the things that people have to consider is if there is a privacy concern. At PS Literary Agency, we have many authors, right? Not many of them not many of them exist as like their only job being writing. Some do, but that's like a pretty small percentage. Most of our authors have day jobs, right? And if you have a day job where the things that you write could impact your employment status, pen name would be a great way to insulate yourself from that. Or if your spouse has an employment where their employment status could be impacted by what you write. My husband has multiple like security clearances, and sometimes I have to be cautious about what I put online for his sake, for like his contract's sake. So that's something to be aware of. And a lot of people who just prefer not to use their legal name for personal reasons, they have separated their personal identity from their legal name. Great case for using a pen name. So those are two cases that I can think of. And also like pen names don't have to be a secret identity. I know several people whose websites will say their name writing as, and that's totally okay. You don't have to be like clandestine about it. It doesn't have to be like a huge secret. You could be like, I write as this and maybe several other things.
So this has been very fun and enlightening. Just one more question for you all. What are some benefits to writing multiple genres? We talked about some of the challenges. What are some of the things that make it worth it? I guess starting with Jessica.
My favorite part is that I get to play. Because I really felt boxed in at first when I was first starting my querying journey. And I first started with a zombie novel. But it was less of a horror and more of a literary sci-fi. And then I thought, well, I don't want to do literary sci-fi for the rest of my life. Like this was a one-off. Like I really enjoyed my time here, but I'm ready to do something else. And so when I learned that you can do something else, like there's no one, you know, the publishing police is not going to get you if you don't stick to a brand. I felt that was very freeing. And now I get to explore all of the things that I love to read and all of the things that I want to see more of. And not every book, not every genre that I read is one that I write. So I love fantasy, but I don't, well, mystery is a better example. I love mysteries, but I will never write a mystery because my brain does not work that way. But in fantasy, I'm a little intimidated by world building, but I feel a little more confident now than I was 5 years ago. And so I am ready to try to move into fantasy. And I feel like some people don't realize that they can do that. Like you can change your mind. And if you don't want to write horror anymore for whatever reason, so maybe something happens in your life and you just don't feel like it and you want to do something else, you can. Same with romance. Like maybe you went through a bad breakup and you don't want to write romance right now. So you can write other things and you don't have to be pigeonholed into one thing. So I really like that about writing different genres.
Awesome. Thank you. Kelsey, what are some of your favorite parts or some of the benefits you found of writing multiple genres?
So writing multiple genres, let's start with the obvious one. It's the same reason why you'll have Lay's potato chips coming out with brand new flavors every 5 seconds. The more shelf space you have, the more stock you have, and the more varying of genres you have, the more books you can sell to more people.
That's a good point.
From another standpoint, I've talked about my autism. Pretty sure I also have ADHD and I get burnt out with a book project. So when you have multiple different genres that you're writing and multiple different author brands, you prevent yourself from getting burnt out with a project. You prevent yourself from getting tired with a project. So that's another benefit that I've found.
Awesome. Thank you. And Bobby.
I think too, like Kelsey was saying with getting burned out, sometimes your audience or your publishers go, you can't write that much. They can't be that good. If you write 4, mystery novels a year, that's too many. But if you write 2 mystery novels and a sci-fi novel and a horror novel, oh, you didn't write those too fast. There's that little misconception of if you're prolific, you're writing too fast, it must not be as good. Which is also a great place where pen names come in, because you can write those if you are prolific, you are fast, you can write those multiple things, and nobody knows. You don't get that. Oh, she's writing too many. She must be hacking it out. She's not very, she needs to slow down, and that kind of stuff. That's bull, you know. So yeah, so there's that. I also like, and short stories are a great way to do this with anthologies and stuff. Like Jessica said, getting to play. You get to play with a genre. Like I'm the same way. I don't write a lot of fantasy, but it would be easier for me to attempt a fantasy in an anthology just to see how I feel about it than to try to sit down and write a 100,000 word fantasy novel, and then go, I don't like this, and you've killed a lot of time. You can try things, doing the
short
media
stories
time.
are great for
Yeah.
experimenting.
Oh yeah, you can try. I've always wanted to try this, and you can do it. If you like it, great. You can do more. If it turns out you don't like it, you can, well, I tried. Getting to play with characters. I write characters I didn't create quite often. I do a lot of work for hire, either for companies or for publishers or corporations or media tie-in stuff. So getting to do those in short bits and play in those
Yeah, I guess like fan fiction.
Yeah, a little to a
Play with
point, yeah.
somebody. Yeah.
It's fan fiction with a lot of rules. There's a lot of because there's a lot of stuff that you can do in fan fiction that you just can't do in because the people that own the characters, their main job is to protect them. You know, um, I like to tell people that this is my explanation, quick, easy explanation of writing media tie-ins. Media tie-in writing is just like Star Trek, the original series. Almost every episode starts with everybody on the bridge. Life's good. We're happy. We're cutting up. Some bad crap happens. We have to deal with it. And at the end of it, everybody's on the bridge. They're happy. They're laughing and they're flying off to their next adventure. That's media tie-in. Yes, that's media tie-in writing. You can do all kind of stuff in the middle, but you have to return that toy to the toy box the way you found it.
Oh.
So that means you can kill Spock, but he's got to be alive at the end of it. You can't, I have a buddy of mine that always tells people, don't blow up Cleveland. We'll need that later. That's kind of like media tie-in play. You know what you can and can't do. And so, so going in and playing, but you can experiment playing with those different genres through things like anthologies or whatever, just to whet your appetite. And sometimes we need that between big projects.
Yes.
Like you've spent months working on your mystery novel. When you're done, the last thing you want to do most of the time is jump right into another mystery novel. It's almost like a palate cleanser, or just let me play, let me try something else, and that can be a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. Lacy?
It can be a really great way to like avoid burnout. I am the type of person who will procrastinate work by working on something else. And I feel like that is a great way. Exactly. So if you're going to switch it up and write it in completely a different genre, I feel like that can be so freeing because it gets the other thing off your mind if you're really stuck with something. So I do a lot of copywriting is what pays my bills. I do a lot of copywriting. I do a lot of sometimes would you call like content marketing ghostwriting? Some people do, some people don't, where you're writing like a blog post for a company or you're writing their emails or something. And if I get really tired of doing that because it can be kind of repetitive and dull, I'll write on a personal project like fiction. And that it's like a palate cleanser. And then you can come back to the other thing you're actually getting paid for with a fresh enthusiasm for it. So that's, to me, the biggest benefit.
Yeah. So great suggestions for like if you just want to dip your toes in and see if it's something you like, and then also fun ways to explore and expand when you put your whole foot and jump right in. So if you would be willing to share some like final thoughts, any farewells or extra promotions even, we can wrap this up a bit. Let's start with Bobby.
I always tell people, if you're going to write, have fun with it. That should be your first and foremost kind of thing. Decide what you want your writing to be. Not everybody's goal who writes, their goal is not always to be a professional writer. Some people write as a hobby. Nothing wrong with that. Some people want this to be their job. Whatever you want to get out of your writing, if you kind of plan for that and aim yourself toward that goal, you can get close to that goal. Sometimes we stumble, but if you like, for me, the greatest thing that I learned about that helped me a lot was I had mentioned to somebody that I wanted writing to be my career. And the question was, do you treat it like a job? And I was like, what do you mean? And it's like, do you go to the office every day and write, or do you wait for the muse to hit? If you're waiting for the muse to hit, you're probably not going to do this as a career, because not everybody has the muse hit them frequently. And that became a watershed moment for me. So I was able to like go, okay, these are my work hours. I go to work like I would any other job. This is just a really cool job. So yeah, so that's my piece of advice is set your goals, set attainable goals.
Mhm.
Don't just set I want to be a New York Times bestselling author can't be goal number one. Sometimes goal number one is I want to finish this manuscript.
That's a
Yeah.
good hard goal sometimes.
Yeah,
Or
yeah, I
goal
want
number
to do
one.
yeah, and then celebrate it. Okay,
Yes.
I wrote the book. Okay, now my next step, we get it published. There's those kind of steps,
Yeah.
and if you
There
celebrate
are
those,
entire panels on this now. So
oh yeah, yeah.
So Kelsey, any kind of last thoughts or yeah, or even farewells or promotions?
I think the best advice that I can give is when you're building your author brand, even if you're using a pen name, a completely made up name, the easiest author brand to maintain is remaining true to yourself.
True. Yeah.
You don't have to try hard to be who you are.
Mhm.
It's a lot harder to pretend to be something you're not.
Because you're gonna forget.
Yeah, exactly.
And you'll slip.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. That's fantastic. And Jessica, final thoughts?
Everybody got all the good thoughts.
Sorry.
That's the downside of going last.
I know.
Yeah, that's why I tried to switch it up, but
But I guess I just want to reiterate that don't be afraid. So if you have something that you want to try and you're scared, just go ahead and make that leap, because maybe it doesn't work out, but at least you can say you tried it and you won't have any regrets. So and if there's something that you want to do, you can make it happen. So you just have to believe that you can do it and find a way, but it is possible.
oh, that's great. That's a great note to end on. So if you could each go through of like where people can find you, buy your books, just like websites, social media places. Start with Jessica. I know this is the easy question, but
Yeah, this is the easy one. You can find, I'm not on Twitter anymore. I was, but it imploded, so I'm gone. But I am on Instagram and Threads at Jessica Lewis Author. And then you can buy any of my books at Books A Million, Barnes and Noble, Amazon, your indie bookstore. That's what I prefer. Everybody support your indies. But wherever books are sold. And then my rom-com, which is called Nav's Foolproof Guide to Falling in Love, will be out March 2025.
And Kelsey?
You can find me, my website is currently being reworked right now, but when that's done, you can find me back at kelseyandlovelady.com. You can also find me as Kelsey and Lovelady, Kelsey A. Lovelady, Lovelady Novels on Twitter, Instagram. You might be able to find me on TikTok too. And in terms of Tea with Coffee Media, teawithcoffee.media, that's our website. And that is how you can find books that I've published with them, as well as all of our other books of our board. You can learn more about our website and about our company. So, yeah.
Awesome. And Bobby?
BobbyNash.com is my main website. There's links to everything. I'm on Facebook and Instagram and Threads and Blue Sky and Pinterest and Instagram, and I think I'm still on Twitter and Patreon, all those places. There's links to all of that there. As we're recording this, which I know we're recording ahead of time, the third book in my Sheriff Myers mystery series just came out, called Standing on the Shadows. Thank you. And then probably around the time this airs, I wrote a short story for a Remo Williams anthology, and also one for a Zorro anthology, which will both be out around the time this airs. I don't have exact dates yet, but yeah, both of those are characters I loved from childhood, and so yeah, getting to write them was just a joy. And
Kelsey,
so yeah,
did you have something to add?
Yeah, I forgot to mention that the
Oh.
sequel to my murder mystery, Permanent Identity, is actually coming out at the end of this year in October.
very nice.
So fun story. I don't kind of exist very much online by design. There is an author who has my same name who writes nonfiction and has a company kind of in the wellness space. She owns the SEO on my name, and I let her have it because I don't like to be found. So I just kind of I do business to business, and I'm not looking for new clients, so I don't really advertise. I'm not selling a course or a book or anything. I'm booked and busy, and I like it that way.
All right.
I hang out in the background.
I guess really quickly for me, I do have books, not just a moderator. Well, okay, sorry, that's a bad way to put it. Moderators are awesome.
That's right.
You can find me on Facebook and Instagram, and I have my website at raedarc.com. And also all of my books are on Kindle Unlimited on Amazon, but also can be found at Barnes & Noble and stores if you request it. So yeah. So if you want to find more content similar to this topic, you can check out Finding Your People, Identifying Your Subgenre from 2023 WriteHive Conference. Also, Creating an Author Brand from 2021 WriteHive Conference. Thank you so much for coming and watching this panel. We hope you enjoyed it, learned something new, and enjoy the rest of WriteHive Conference 2024.